Getting clear on your core values can and will change your life. When you pay close attention to what actually matters to you, you can make clearer decisions, reduce ambiguity, and focus your attention on taking deliberate, meaningful action. Today, we're going to talk about core values, what they are, why they're important, and how to determine what your core values are. Self-improvement and personal values are inextricably tied. As a matter of fact, values should be the first step of any self-improvement process. Personal values define what self-improvement means to you. They give you a direction to improve in. First, let's talk about the what of core values. The first time I put any real thought into values was in a business administration class in college. We spent a lot of time in that class talking about companies' mission statements, vision statements, and the values that they live by. This idea was that they used these values and these statements to make decisions and determine the direction they were going in the business. Now, my brain works in systems, and so it was very easy for me to see that these tools could be valuable not just for business, but in your own personal life as well. You can use a set of core values to guide your decisions, actions, and behaviors in your everyday life. Put another way, personal values are the measuring stick by which we determine what is a successful and meaningful life. Now, of course, core values didn't start with business. They actually started with philosophy thousands of years ago. Both Eastern and Western cultures had concepts of ethics, and ethics were basically values plus morality. In fact, many of us today get some of our values from our moral basis, be that a religion, a society, a family you grew up in. All of these ideals shape who we are and what our values are. Okay, let's talk about why values are important. At a base level, understanding your values translates to understanding what's important to you in life, which can help you determine a direction to go. Knowing your values can lead to a calmer demeanor in stressful situations. According to a 2005 study, people who affirmed their values have significantly lower cortisol responses to stress. This research suggests that reflecting on what's important to you can keep your physical and psychological response to stress under control. Now let's jump over to the desk and talk through a few different methods for determining your core values. Okay, so we're going to talk through two different methods on finding your core values. The first method would be the values inventory list. This is very simple. Basically, sit down with your note-taking method of choice. Mine is going to be my computer here. And we are just going to take a minute, open up a note or a document, however you'd like to do it, and start processing through and thinking about what you value in life. So for this exercise, I'm going to make a character. Let's call him Joe. So Joe is going to sit down and start thinking about the things that are important to him, the things that he values. So Joe might value community involvement, but Joe spends most of his weekends partying. And that seems to be one of his values. Is partying that's his value? Maybe not. Maybe it's connection, maybe? That's good, that's good. And now Joe's at a point where he's kind of stuck. He's like, what do I value? This is tough. And he thinks about, well, something that I enjoy is good vibes. Okay, good vibes. Wait, is good vibes a value? Joe's not really sure. So what does he do? Well, the next thing I would do here is if you get stuck, this is where I'd start looking at some lists of values. I've linked a couple of them down in the description, but there are a ton of resources available online. So Joe's gonna keep going now until he has a list of somewhere between 10 and 15 values or things that he thinks he values. Now remember, our values are a compass that help guide the direction we're going. So if we have too many values, it's really hard to use that compass that's pointing in all different directions. And so what we're going to do now is narrow down our list from 10 to 15 down to a maximum of 5. Now, Joe has many of these that are actually very similar. So he has community involvement, he has connection, he has good vibes, his friendships. I would say that these are all within the same category, and so now Joe should decide which of these is actually the most important to him. At the end of this process, Joe looks and decides that connection is the one that actually makes the most sense for what he's looking for. Now, he also had community involvement and he had contribution on there. Those are pretty similar as well. Seems like there's something important there. So as Joe's processing and thinking through this, he realizes that contributing to a cause that's important to him is important. So he's going to put contribution as one of them. Now, when Joe isn't partying on the weekend, Joe likes to do yoga and kind of connect with his inner self. And so he has some values on this list that reflect that. He has peace, balance, and beauty on here. And all of these are in a similar type of category. So as he's thinking through these, he realizes that it's actually peace that he's looking for. Now, of the remaining values, he has adventure, humor, boldness, and challenge. And after some consideration, he realizes challenge is close, but it's maybe not quite right. So he's gonna go back to his list of values and see if we can find a word that's more precise. So after some looking at some lists and some consideration, Joe realizes that it's actually not challenge that's the important thing. It's actually the accomplishment he feels after completing a challenge. So instead of challenge, he's going to list down accomplishment. And finally, he's going to list humor because that one feels important to him as well. So as he's gone through and considered and brought these down to his top 5, now it's really important to rank these, because if there are two things that you need to decide between that are competing with your values, ultimately if you're living a life in alignment with your values, you should choose the one that is the higher priority based on the ranked values. So as an initial pass, Joe has gone through and ranked these, but they might not quite feel right yet. As he thinks about it and processes through some of these, he realizes that he actually wants to change things around a little bit, because he realizes that, hey, contribution is actually more important to him than humor, for example. Even though he put it 5th, he just, as he's processing through, it doesn't feel right. He kind of does a gut check and realizes that contribution is actually more important to him than humor, but humor is definitely more important than peace. Okay, so that's the really simple gut check way to go through and find your values. The first time I found my values, this is the way I did it. And I would say that this will take less time, but I think it will also be a little bit less accurate to what you actually value and kind of going through a thoughtful process. I did this the first time, and then I went back through again and again and again, and it took me quite a while to actually nail down a list that I felt really good about. Now, this second method I would call the worksheet method. I first learned about this in a weekend college class I had to take my final year of university. The class was titled something along the lines of Discovering Your Inner Leader, or something terrible and cheesy like that. But the content of the class far surpassed the terrible title. The class was a full weekend workshop basically on how to discover what's important to you as a leader. And of course, we finished up on the high ropes course because why not? It's kind of ridiculous, but as I ziplined off the high ropes course on the last day of the class, I felt an incredible sense of freedom. I'd spent the weekend defining what I was capable of. I'd overcome any fear I had of heights, and I felt like I could do anything. One of the exercises that we did in the class was on defining our core values, and I want to walk through that worksheet method now. This first stage of the process is the brainstorming phase, and so feel free to write down anything you want here. The first thing was to identify some peak life experiences, things that were mountaintop experiences for you, things that are stuck in your brain as really important positive experiences. Think about what you were doing, who you were with, what else might have contributed to that feeling beyond the situation, and ultimately, how did you feel when it was all over? Take some time and process through several of these situations, anything that comes to mind. Once you're done with that, then we're gonna wanna flip over and do exactly the opposite. So times that you felt like your values were suppressed. I remember discovering my most important personal value in this section. Consider some times when you've been angry, frustrated, and upset. What was happening? Who were you with? What else contributed to that feeling? And how did you feel when it was all over? Process through this. spend a significant amount of time on it. I think we spent 45 minutes on each of these 2 questions, and I kept discovering new things over the next weeks as I went home and thought about it. So really spend some time on this and process through some peak life experiences, some really mountaintop moments, and some times where you felt angry and frustrated because one of your values was being suppressed. Now, as you think through these moments, identify the core values that were present during these moments. To give a personal example, actually taking that class was a bit of a mountaintop experience for me. The idea of overcoming your fear of heights and ziplining off at the end, I'd never done any of that before. Plus, all the motivational elements that we talked about during the course of the class, it just kind of made for a mountaintop experience. So some of the values I experienced during that were the feeling I could do anything, a sense of power and control over my life. I felt a strong sense of achievement, and ultimately a strong sense of purpose. Now, this class also took place like 2 weeks before I graduated from college, so all of those feelings were mixed up in it too. Now, as I look back, I realize most of those still aren't important to me, but I do feel a great sense of purpose, so I'll put that on my list. Now start making a list of the values that still resonate with you. By the time we're done, we should have 10 to 15 values on this list. Now, like we did in our first method, we're going to narrow this down to our top 5 core values, because if everything is important, then nothing is important. And now, just like we did last time, we're going to order these in order of what is most important versus least important. I like to use a rating scale, 1 out of 10, 10 being the most important to me, 1 being the least important to me. Once you're done with this, take a minute and actually write a little statement about each one as to why it's important to you, or you can make a value statement, something like health to live a life full of vitality and energy every day. This is important because it actually helps you define, again, why something is actually important to you, especially when you come into a stressful time or a time that your values are tested. Next would be the gut check phase. So walk away from them, give your values some time, go sleep on it, and come back and look at them the next day, and just use your gut and say, is this accurate to me? And if not, feel free to make some changes. This is not a set in stone list. This is a continually evolving list of the things that are ultimately important to you and drive the way you want to live your life. If we want to take this a step further, we can ask the big scary question, am I living in alignment with my values? Here's how I'd go about actually doing this. So first, let's make a little spreadsheet and rank your goals in order from most important to least important. Then list the value and give it a score from 1 to 10 on how much you're living in alignment with that value. And then more importantly, list why you scored, say, an 8 in learning. If a score is less than 7, that's an area you should probably evaluate. Then make a simple action plan on one thing you can do to bring that score up. The final bit here, and the whole purpose of this, is to actually start doing something with your values. So now this is a point where you can actually take your values and start living your life in alignment with them, making decisions based on them, and taking action based on them. I'd recommend having your values up somewhere that you can see, whether that's maybe the home page of your webpage when you open up your computer, or on a list next to you somewhere where you can see it. But start meditating on these and thinking about them and kind of keeping them in front of you at the forefront of your mind as you're making decisions in your life. After doing all this research on values for this video, it's really made me stop and examine what's actually important and valuable to me. This can be really hard and really scary, but at the end of the day, this is really, really important because it's the basis of living a better life.